Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Import Export Hub channel, everybody. It's Bogdan here, your host for the next couple of minutes. Thanks for joining in, and guys, without practically begging you to hit those small buttons below this video, let's jump into today's topic, in which I will cover the exports and the imports of Denmark, which is home to Lego and Pandora, among other Danish brands. It has a population of roughly 6 million people, with a GDP per capita around $68,000. And lastly, another interesting fact about Denmark, in terms of logistics performance index, it has an overall score of 4.1 on a scale from 0 to 5, lacking a little bit in international shipments. So guys, these are some basic facts about Denmark, and now I'll focus my attention on the boring data that I've managed to compile, and I will start as usual with Denmark's overall exports, who in 2022 amounted to some $129 billion, thanks to the strong performances coming from chapters 30 and 84, so pharma products and machinery and mechanical appliances, with an overall weight of 28% in Denmark's overall exports, which is quite impressive if you ask me. But of course, Denmark is a leader in other industries, if you didn't know, like, I don't know, electrical machinery, meat processing also, so chapter 2, or even dairy produce, chapter 4, who did quite well in 2022 and managed to export some $3.2 billion. As you can see here, the cumulative value for the top 10 chapters is around 60%. Very, very good from my point of view, meaning that there are a lot of other industries who support Denmark's export offer, if you want. Now, in what concerns the year-on-year changes, we have a 3.3% positive change overall, with a mix of contraction and expansion in these top 10 chapters. Mineral fuels and oils here registered the largest increase, both in absolute and relative terms, while the 10% drop from chapter 85 puts this chapter on the contraction side. Moving now, guys, to the import flow very, very quickly. We see here that for 2022, Denmark's imports amounted to some $125.7 billion, with chapter 27, 84, and 85 as top drivers. But we have others like, I don't know, chapter 30, chapter 73, or 62. So articles of apparel and clothing accessories. This last one with almost $3.5 billion worth of imports. We have a 3.2% overall increase, with mineral fuels and oils contributing the most, both in absolute and relative terms, while on the negative side, chapter 84 had the largest fall, some $780 million fewer imports relative to the previous year, so 2021. The compound annual growth rate for the last 5 years is positive, 4.3% more precisely, with all the top 10 chapters having positive figures. And in what concerns the balance of trade, and limiting myself to these top 10 chapters, from the import flow, we see that overall we have a $3.4 billion positive balance of trade, with 3 chapters from this top 10 import flow having a positive balance of trade. So we're talking about chapter 84, 30, and also 90. Meaning that here Denmark has a competitive advantage, especially in what concerns chapter 30, so pharmaceutical products. So guys, these were Denmark's main exports and imports, and now I will take the top 5 from each flow in order to see its trading partners as well. And I will start with the top performer from the export flow, so chapter 30, pharmaceutical products, where, as I've said previously, Denmark has a big competitive advantage, and we see that in 2022 its exports amounted to $19.9 billion, with special categories having the largest share. some 80 something percent. And here by special categories, guys, you should understand that Denmark didn't want to break down the trading partners, most probably, if you ask me, as a measure to protect their competitive advantage. While Germany and the United States finished the podium with 367 and 267 million dollars respectively. But as you can also see, we have other important partners like, I don't know, Sweden, Poland, or the Czech Republic, this last one with some $72 million worth of imports from Denmark. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, we see that overall we have a 2.4% positive change, some $460 million in absolute terms, with the United States having the largest contraction, some $58 million, while the special categories had the largest increase, some $427 million. And guys, if you're wondering what drove Denmark's exports from this chapter, well, towards these special categories we have heading 3004, while towards the United States we have heading 3002. So we are talking about human blood, antisera, and other blood fractions. Jumping now, guys, to chapter 84, which was Denmark's second largest export driver for 2022. We see some $16.3 billion worth of exports, which is almost 1.8% less than the previous year, with Germany here, the United States, and Sweden as the main destinations, followed by others like, I don't know, France, China, or Italy, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, China had the largest contraction in this top 10 list, both in absolute and relative terms, while in terms of expansion, the Netherlands had the largest one, again, both in absolute and relative terms. As for the main drivers here from this chapter, we see that towards Germany we have heading 8481, while towards China we have heading 8413. So we are talking about pumps for liquids, whether or not fitted with a measuring device. Moving now, guys, to chapter 27, which is Denmark's third largest export driver. And here we see some $9.5 billion worth of exports, some 55% more than in 2021, with Germany, special categories, and the Netherlands as the main destinations, which were followed by others like, I don't know, Norway, United Kingdom, or Panama, again, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, we have just two countries in this list, in this top 10 list, who had contractions, so Sweden and the United Kingdom, while the rest of 8 had positive changes. The largest one, at least in absolute terms, happening in relation with Germany, some $1.55 billion more exports. As for the main exports, well, towards the Netherlands, we have heading 2710, so petroleum oils, excluding the crude one, while towards sunny Spain, we have heading 2707, so oils and other products of the distillation of high temperature coal tar. Moving now, guys, to the fourth largest export driver, we have here chapter 85. Electrical machinery and equipment with a highly volatile dynamic in these last 5 years. And we see that in 2022, Denmark's exports amounted to some $8.57 billion, some 10% less than in 2021, with Germany, Sweden, and the United States as the main destinations, which were followed by other important ones like, I don't know, Norway, Poland, or China. The last one with some $229 million worth of exports. The year-on-year dynamics are confirming the volatility of Denmark's exports from this chapter, and we have a 50-50 split between growth and contraction, and I will mention just the top performers in terms of absolute value. So on the negative side, we have the United Kingdom with almost $982 million fewer imports from Denmark, while on the positive side, we have Germany with almost $236 million more imports than in 2021, sorry. As for the main drivers towards Sweden, we have heading 8517, mostly smartphones, while towards Finland we have heading 8502, so we're talking about electric generating sets and rotary converters. And finally, guys, the fifth and last chapter that I will cover from the export flow is chapter 90, with some $4.65 billion worth of exports in 2022, 1% lower than in 2021, with the United States here, Germany and China as the main destinations, which were followed by countries like Poland, Japan or Norway, again to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, I've told you earlier that it's negative, some $50 million fewer exports in absolute terms, with China and Sweden both importing with some $50 million less for each in 2022. While on the positive side, if you want, the United States managed to import with some $123 million more in 2022, which, let's face it, helped dampen the overall negative result. As for the main export drivers from this chapter, we have heading 9027 towards Poland and heading 9018 towards Norway. So we are talking about instruments and appliances used in medical, surgical, dental or veterinary sciences. And guys, with this fifth chapter being covered from the export flow, my job is done here and I will move to the import flow. And we're having chapter 27 as the top performer with some $14.2 billion worth of imports in 2022, with Sweden here, Norway and Germany as the main partners, which were followed by others like, I don't know, the United Kingdom, Belgium or Libya, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. And as you can see here, the year-on-year change was positive, some 40% in relative terms and almost $4.1 billion in absolute ones, with all the top 10 partners here having registered positive figures relative to 2021. The largest increase, again in absolute terms, happening in relation with Sweden, almost $1.2 billion. As we can see, Russia here fell in the rankings, but still managed to export almost $90 million, most probably before the EU sanctions kicked in. But anyways, coming back to the table here, let's see what drove Denmark's imports from this chapter. And here we have electrical energy coming from Norway and crude petroleum coming from the United States. So we are talking about heading 2709. Jumping now to Denmark's second import driver, and we have here chapter 84, which is a vast chapter with almost $13.9 billion worth of imports in 2022, with Germany, Sweden and the Netherlands as the main partners, which were followed by others like, I know, Italy, France or Belgium, again to name just a couple from this top 10 list. The overall year-on-year change was negative, some 5.4% in relative terms and almost $786 million in absolute ones, with big contractions relative to Germany and Sweden. So Denmark's first and second partner, which managed to export with some $870 million less, of course, if we combine both figures. But on the other hand, the United States and the United Kingdom managed positive figures, but not enough to counter the big contraction coming from Germany and Sweden. As for the main drivers, from Italy we have taps, valves and similar appliances for pipes, tanks and the like, while from France we have here heading 8421, so we are talking about centrifuges including centrifugal dryers, filtering machinery and parts thereof. Jumping now guys to Denmark's third largest import driver, we have here chapter 85, which is again a very vast and complex chapter with some $12 billion worth of imports in 2022, almost 3% more relative to 2021, with Sweden here, China and Germany as the main partners, which were followed by other important ones like, I don't know, Poland, the Czech Republic or Belgium, again to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. Here we see that the year-on-year absolute change was positive, some $345 million more imports, thanks mainly to the strong numbers coming from China, who managed to increase its year-on-year exports with some $257 million, while Sweden managed to see its exports shrunk with almost $283 million. As for the main drivers from China, we have heading 8541, so semiconductor devices, including photovoltaic cells, while from the Czech Republic we have heading 8528. The next chapter is Denmark's fourth main import driver, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the fourth one, and it's chapter 87. So mostly vehicles other than rolling stock, with some $9.5 billion worth of imports with traditional partners like Germany, Sweden and Belgium, which were followed by other big exporters like the Netherlands, Italy or France, again to mention just a couple. In what concerns the year-on-year change, we see that it was negative, some 3% in relative terms and $296 million in absolute ones, with big contractions in relation with Germany, Sweden and France. While on the other hand, we see a good figure coming from Belgium, who managed to export with some $104 million more, but clearly not enough to cancel the overall negative figure. As for the main drivers, we have parts and accessories for vehicles coming from China, so heading 8709, while from France we have heading 8703. So we are talking about cars designed for the transport of less than 10 persons. And now guys, with this chapter being covered, I will move to the last one. Bear with me a little bit more, chapter 30. And we see that in 2022, the overall imports amounted to almost $5.8 billion, which is almost 12% less in relative terms, and $765 million in absolute one, with big contractions in relation with the top partners like special categories, Germany, the Netherlands or Belgium, even though partners like Spain, Ireland and Poland managed to increase their exports, and this should be considered a back to normal hard landing if you want. Back to pre-pandemic levels if you ask me, as let's face it, 2021 guys was an outlier in this respect, and the figures for 2022 confirm the trend. As for the main drivers for both special categories and Spain, we have the same heading, so 3004. And guys, with this being said, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. I really hope you've liked it. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like below this video. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.